family. We're so glad that so many people were able to come out and help us celebrate Sally tonight. We are here out in front of Sally's house that she loved so much, a house that is as unique and whimsical as Sally was. And we are, of course, here on September 16th on her 100th birthday. And so while it's sad that Sally isn't here with us physically, we're all still here to celebrate her and the wonderful life she lived. It has given our family a lot of solace over the past couple of weeks that we were able to fulfill so many of her wishes throughout all this. For example, the margarita machine was something she specifically requested for her 100th birthday party. So let's all give a big thank you to Sally for that. Sally also, for decades, always said that when she passed, she hoped that it would be here on the farm and not in a nursing home or a hospital or anything like that. So it's been reassuring to us that she was able to get that wish. Another request that she had was she told many of us in the family that if we were to do a memorial service, which of course we were going to, but she did request that we have some specific music that would be performed. So we will be hearing that towards the end of the program. For anyone who knew Sally, you won't be surprised to know that the pieces she requested were works from musical theater. The first was a song by ABBA that Sally got to know when she and her daughter Dinah went to New York to see Mamma Mia on Broadway in 2001. And as she was leaving the theater, she told Dinah, she said, "That's my song. I really like that song." And in the interim, she had requested several times that one be performed at her memorial. And in addition to that, again, all of us who know Sally would not be surprised to know that the other one was originally performed by puppets, and it's a work from Jim Henson and the Muppets. She also had a request that her daughter Dinah read a section of a novel that she loved so much. And Dinah isn't able to be with us physically today, but she was able to record that excerpt. So we're going to begin by listening to an audio recording of Sally's daughter Dinah reading an excerpt from the novel Back When We Were Grown-Ups by Ann Tyler that I feel is very fitting for today because the scene that takes place during this excerpt happens to be during a 100th birthday party.
This is Sally's favorite reading from the novel Back When We Were Grown-Ups by Ann Tyler, as read by Diana Channing Brooks Tourtellot. The champagne was a top brand. Rebecca made Ordinarily, they'd have drunk something cheaper, just sparkling wine, to be honest, but today, not today. Well, we don't observe 100th birthday every day of the week. "A toast," she said when everyone had a glass. She raised her own glass. She was standing in the center of the front parlor, surrounded by so many people. And at that moment, she wasn't even sure where Poppy was located. But she said, "To Poppy! To Poppy!" they all murmured. And then, in the silence when the others were drinking, from over near the fireplace, Poppy said, "Thank you all." He was standing next to Mr. Hardesty and grasping one side of the walker, so that at first glance it seemed that the two men were holding hands. When he had everybody's attention, he said, "Well, this has been just what I dreamed of, I tell you. From the very start of the day, it's been perfect. Sunshine on my bedspread when I opened my eyes, radiators coming on all dusty smelling and cozy, waffles for breakfast, that puffy kind that are light inside but crispy outside, and 100% maple syrup, heated first in the microwave and then poured over in a pool and left a moment to soak, so that the waffles swell and turn spongy, and every crumb of them is sopping with that toasty, nutty flavor." Well, this would take a while. Rebecca downed the rest of her champagne and looked for a place to set her glass. Then she felt someone's hand on the small of her back. "Why don't we find you a place to sit?" Zeb said, and steered her through the crowd. Excuse us, please. Excuse us." People gave way, not noticing, still listening to Poppy's speech. He had traveled past the waffles and now had arrived at his morning shave. "Anything nicer?" then soft, rich lather, and a plenitude of hot water. The bathroom's warm and soapy smelling, the mirror's a steamy blur, and you draw the razor down your cheek and leave this smooth swath of skin. Zeb guided Rebecca toward the piano. Rebecca dropped heavily onto the bench. She was tired, come to think of it. The best thing about solitaire is it's so solitary, Poppy was saying. You're allowed to think these aimless thoughts, and nobody asks what you're up to. You lay out the cards, slip, 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 a peaceful sound. And then you sit a while and think, and the mantel clock is a tick-tocking, and the smell of fresh hot coffee is coming up from downstairs. People seem to have reached the conclusion that Poppy's speech was background music. They were discreet. They kept their voices low, but they went up their own. Lunch, Poppy was saying, had been precisely what he'd requested. A peanut butter jelly sandwich on whole wheat. Oh, I know it's not foie gras, he said, but there's something satisfactory about a PB&J done right, and this was done exactly right. The same great jelly, smeared so thick that it had started soaking through, making those oozy purple stains like bruises on the bread. Rebecca's mother and Aunt Ida tiptoed across the room, their purses tucked under their arms. They picked their way around a game of jacks on the rug and trilled their fingers toward Rebecca. Don't get up, Aunt Ida mouthed. But of course Rebecca did get up. She followed them out to the foyer where they could speak in normal tones. I won't urge you to stay, she said as she helped them into their things. I know you want to be home before dark. Already, the light outside was dimming, she noticed. Both women placed soft, dry kisses on her cheek, and Aunt Ida said, Thanks for a lovely party, darling. Thank you for coming. But I didn't quite understand about the guest list, her mother said. Sorry? Who were some of those people? Ordinarily, Rebecca would have been annoyed, but something about her mother's wording struck her as comical, and so she merely laughed and said, Drive safely. Other guests were stirring now. They were looking at their watches, sending meaningful glances toward the people that they had come with. Instead of returning to her bench, she took a seat on the couch next to Peter. Where's he got to? She whispered, meaning Poppy. Nap time, he whispered back. Nap time and its cool white sheets that warmed as they grew used to you. It's like you made yourself a nest, the exact same shape as your body, Poppy was saying. It's this body shape of warmth. And if you find you're a little too warm, you just move your feet the least little bit, and there's this fresh new coolness. Then, Patch said far too loudly, What's Poppy trying to do, set a world record? Shh, Rebecca told her. He must be nearing the finish line now. He's dressing for the party. That crackly feel of starched shirt sleeves when you slide your arms inside them. And anyhow, Rebecca was enjoying this. It was sort of like a report on what it was like to be alive, she decided. Let's say you had to report back to heaven at the end of your time on Earth. Tell them what your personal allotment of experience had been. Wouldn't it sound like Poppy's speech? The smell of radiator dust on a winter morning, the taste of hot maple syrup. Why, her own report might take even longer. Now, Poppy was describing the candles on his cake. A wall of flame, he called it, and the wish he'd made before he blew them out. I wished for an even bigger party next year, to celebrate my 101st, my palindromic birthday. Several people sent Rebecca looks of sympathy. The jacks players had reached their 90s. Zeb placed a glass of champagne in her hands and planted a kiss on top of her head. There were still so many happenings yet to be hoped for in her life. And the icing was my favorite fondant, Poppy was saying. It melted in my mouth. I held a bite in my mouth, and it sat for just a second, and then it trickled down my throat, all that melting sweetness. On the TV screen, as the VCR continued to play old home movies, Rebecca's face appeared, merry and open and sunlit. And seeing that, she realized that she really had been having a wonderful time.
We talked about the order, but I forgot what it meant. So I'm Lee Tourtellot. I'm the daughter-in-law of Sally. I was married for 32 years to her son Nick and lived down there. And she was, I've told many of you that, she was my mother-in-law, but she was also my neighbor, my friend, my link to Nick, so many things that I was just a really lucky girl to get to have Sally for her mother-in-law. And some people tell me she was lucky to have me too. So, but I think maybe one of my first hints that I really liked Sally, Nick and I went to a lot of movies when we first started dating, and one of them was a Swedish movie many of you might have seen called My Life as a Dog. And in that, it was in Swedish. They, had subtitles. But some of the story, it's a little boy and his mother's terminally ill, and he goes to live with his uncle. And he and his uncle bond over this song that they sing on their little radio. And it's kind of funny, and but they were singing it in Swedish. But the tune kind of went like this, although I really shouldn't be doing this. My son will be embarrassed, but it was kind of da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Anyway, we leave the movie, and Nick kind of sheepishly says to me, "My mother knows the words to that song." And I say back to him, "I know the words to that song. The song was, I've got a lovely bunch of coconuts." It was on the flip side of our 45 record that was Animal Crackers in My Soup that I listened to over and over when we were kids. You guys remember that? And we sing, "I've got a lovely bunch of coconuts." So that was my first clue that maybe I had things in common with Sally. Later, I found out she went to Southwest High School. Well, I went to Southwest High School. She lived in a house on the corner of 57th Street and Summit when she was 57th and Summit when she was growing up. Which it just so happens my good friend Kitty McCants from high school grew up in that house. And I was like, "Well, which bedroom was yours?" "Well, it was the front one on the east side." "Well, that was Kitty's bedroom. I spent the night in Kitty's bedroom so many times." And then when she would just tell me stories of her childhood, and we'd be sitting on the sun porch, or it was an interesting house because you kind of went up the stairs and it had a room, which was, I guess, the maid's room, but it was Bill's room when my friend Kitty lived there. But, I could always just picture, and her stories came to life to me because it helped a lot that you could picture the house. And then I remember once David or John, they had to write a report about something about, they had to interview like an older person and write a report. And so Sally was like, "Well, I don't know what story to tell him." And I said, "Well, tell him the story about how the bread man used to come down that street, and with his horse, it would stop, and then he'd walk up and deliver the bread." And just all the stories were really great to me because I could picture where she was. And so, kind of had that in common with her. She was the second daughter. Sometimes I would hear her other children, Michael and Darla mostly, talk about her, and she was just an only child. And I would say, you know what? She wasn't she doesn't have the soul of an only child. For the first 5 years of her life, she had a big sister. And I grew up with a big sister, so somehow I thought maybe, but I was like, no, I don't see her as the soul of an only child. I see her, as a second kid. And I talked with that about Judy earlier, what that's like. And then she did puppet shows. And I we did puppet shows when I grew up. And so we kind of had that in common. And later on, she got me into doing puppet shows again when we would do them at the Toy and Miniature Museum. So, you know, we just meshed really well. And it was lucky. It was lucky for me. Nick would tell me, you know how nice that is for me that you like my mom? And I would say, well, I can imagine, yeah. And then we took travels, and we had the family together, and we became here on this property. After we had the children, Nick would sometimes call us the Pine Lane Five. And so I'm proud to be living with her here as part of the Pine Lane Five. And I'm sorry that our numbers have quit. A cousin, well, it was her husband George's brother's child, sent me an email. And at the end of it, she said, and she was just remembering her really from childhood and growing up. But she said, it's funny how Sally treated everyone equally and made us all feel special. But we had different relationships with her, as if she knew what we needed most in our lives at any given moment. A kind word or a kick in the ass. And I think you can find that. You could always come and count on getting really great stories and subtle, great advice. And as a mother-in-law, she was great because she always just told me I was wonderful. I don't know what I'm going to do without that. but that's my clue. If you're ever going to be a mother, you know, tell them they're wonderful. You're good with your kids. You just do everything great. But I loved it. Thank you.
Sally was blessed with a large family and many, many friends, and they lived all over the world. And so as that goes, not all of them are able to be here with us today. Next, we're going to hear a recording from my cousin, Sally's grandson, George Tourtellot, and some of his recollections of Sally.
Sally was, of course, my grandmother, and I'd like to share some impressions she left on me. My most prominent recollection of Sally is her verbal capacity. She was always telling stories, and it seemed to inevitably erupt in laughter, and she continued telling the story through the laughter, and the details would just flow out of her effortlessly, and it gave me the sense that she was really on the ball and in control. Among the stories she'd tell me were ones she thought I'd be interested in. That included ones about my grandfather, since of course I'd never met him. It was nice to hear those stories of him through her eyes. Besides her command for storytelling, I remember her gift for putting ideas into action. She always had new creations, stories, songs, puppets, and more that she wanted to show us, and seemingly be taking over her house, hanging from the ceiling even. So for kids, when I was a kid, imagination and arts and crafts is what we're all about. So I was pretty inspired by her. I started doing a lot of paper-mache myself, working with wood and glue, nails, paint. She was always very encouraging of that, and to me, the resounding lesson was that creative ideas can and should take form. And I think of that lesson a lot. Seeing Sally almost never meant seeing only Sally. Going over to the farm nearly always meant a larger gathering. So chatting with Nick, Lori, John, David, and often Dinah and one or more of the Ruddys. So I hold a lot of good memories of those larger gatherings, and of course have reflected fondly and frequently on Nick in particular this past year. So Sally liked having a good time, and keeping company was a lot of that, it seemed to me. Perhaps because she was surrounded by younger people throughout her life, she seemed to pick up on new lingo and trends, and so despite being virtually 100, she projected agelessness, which makes it more difficult to reconcile in passing. I'm sure others will say it as well, but Sally was one of a kind, and to me, a very special kind of grandmother. On this very much.
Well, I loved all the spontaneous stories. I wish I had them, but I'm not going to do that tonight. So, it's written down in Kathy's. What? Louder? Okay. All of us here today have been blessed to have known and loved Sally. As was just stated, she definitely was a one of a kind, like an original fine piece of art. And while none of us can ever be duplicated, in my wildest dreams, I can't imagine another as kind, smart, funny, warm, talented, and beautiful as Sally. Not even close. She was all those things and more. She was so full of life. She was so full of mischief. At 99, she would absolutely light up in the presence of a gentleman. I'm sure that in one way or another, we all have consciously or not tried to emulate her, and we have learned from all that she has had to offer. Sally was so lucky to have such a loving family. The very first of them to be introduced to our class, which is what I am. I'm representing the pottery class that Sally was part of for so many years, were the twins. She brought in these two adorable boys when they were little, long before we met the parents. And we watched Sally guide them as they made adorable little whimsical clay figures. And not too much later, we got to meet the rest of the family. It wouldn't have been possible for Sally to stay in her home without the loving care of Nick and Lori for all those years. They cared for her always, and more recently, Lori, sweet, kind Lori, was always there for her. The Pottery Crew recently created a book to honor Sally for her 100th birthday. We plan to present it here tonight. With Kathy at the helm, we all submitted photos, and I was asked to write the intro. It was completed and published on the day Sally died. It wasn't written as a memorial. It was written as a tribute to Sally, celebrating this 100th birthday milestone. I'm going to read what I wrote on behalf of our class. And while I hope Sally could have read it herself, I have no doubt that she knew exactly how we felt about her. We have only a few copies of these books here, but if other of you would like to have it, Kathy has a link so that you can download and order it if you like. So here's what I wrote in the book. I will explain. We were an established class. I mean, we'd been together for a while. We were, we didn't welcome new people. We liked us. So, pottery, 2002. In 2002, we are told that a new person is joining the Thursday AM class. We're a bit cliquey and we all roll our eyes. In walks Sally Ruddy, a beautiful, creative, older woman who we fell in love with after the first 5 minutes. Sally, your warmth, your wisdom, your humor, your storytelling immediately captured our hearts. We gravitated to you as we watched you sculpt and throw, and it didn't take long for you to become wonderful friends to each of us. We all considered ourselves so lucky to have you join us every Thursday morning.
You helped each of us in so many ways as our mentor, our role model, and we all wanted to be just like Sally when we grew up. Ours was not an ordinary pottery class. We went on trips, we had overnights, we went out to dinner, we took field trips. You kept vodka in your overnight case, and we never, ever missed a birthday. We were always ready to party. So here it is 20 years later, and you're turning 100. How special you were then, and how special you are now, and how very much you have given to us. That wisdom, that humor, and all the memories that we will always hold dear, we are ever grateful. Sally, we wish you a very happy 100th birthday, surrounded by those who love you dearly. What you have added to our lives is immeasurable. We thank you, and we love you always. The Mudbuds. So, with that, Kathy, Linda, whoever, come on up if you're in my class. If you're in Kathy's class. And Joy, we can bring something for you. Howie, we'll bring it to her. Okay. If I was to present this to you, what would you think? Okay, so we went to Crystal Bridges. We had gone through the museum, we went out to dinner, we had a wonderful day, and after dinner we were to celebrate two of our classmates' birthdays. And on the way up in the elevator, I guess somebody said, "I'll be up in a minute, I'm going to check to find if I can buy some liquor at the restaurant or where the nearest bar is." And Sally said, "Oh no," and she opened her suitcase.
We thought you just had a lot of makeup.
Oh wait, there's
Oh, wait,
two
right
things.
here.
Yeah.
It was this. Anyway, I take one for yourself.
Totally, this is before Tito's. But Tito's was her preferred brand.
This was before
Yeah, she's totally in there. But yeah.
If you win again today,
It would be
that.
Tito's.
Yeah.
And you have one for yours.
My spouse is Thanks, Mary.
We can do that. You do the song.
I have a dream, a song to sing, to help me cope with anything. If you see the wonder of a fairy tale, you can take the future even if you fail. I believe in angels, something good in everything I see. I believe in angels. When I know the time is right for me, I'll cross the street. I have a dream. I have a dream, a fantasy to help me through reality. a destination makes it worth the while. Pushing through the darkness, still another mile. I believe in angels, something good in everything I see. I believe in angels. When I know the time is right for me, I'll cross the stream. I have a dream. I'll cross the stream. I have a dream. I'll cross the stream. I have a dream. Life's like a movie, write your own ending. Keep believing, keep pretending. We've done just what we said to do. Thanks to our lovers, the dreamers, and you.
Well, that concludes our program, but there's still plenty of margaritas to be had, so we hope that everyone will stick around and share their favorite memories of Sally. Thank you all.
Thank you.